Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Are You Scared Yet? I'm Dalton again, obviously, and as I said last week, this week's episode is going to be the top 10 of the 2010 decade and also my top 10 of last year. The next episode, the top 10s will end a little while, and then I'll go into more structured episodes, maybe about like one movie, a few movies. I might have a few people on. I've been talking to a few of my friends to see if they want to come on, and they're all meaning it very positively. So why don't we get this started and jump right into number 10. My number 10 for the last decade is The Autopsy of Jane Doe. I was just very surprised at what they were able to do with so little. It's just one location, mostly two actors, and the atmosphere in it is just so enclosing and just creepy. Like, I can't really say much about it other than it's a father and his son. They work at a morgue, and then they get a body from this police officer from a burning building, but the body seems fine. And that's where I have to leave it. It's so good. Obviously, would have to be number 10. But if you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend it. Number 9 is possibly one of my favorite horror comedies of all time, Tucker and Dale vs. Evil. It is absolutely hilarious. Just the thought of taking the hillbilly slasher and turning it on its head is an amazing thought to have. And then you just have these two rednecks that are just not threatening at all, and a bunch of college kids who think they are the most terrifying thing they've ever seen just due to horrible awkwardness and the leader of their little group that's kind of an asshole. And the effects in it are just so good. Like, there's a kid that jumps in a wood chipper and they try to save him, but they can't. And then they're just dragging a bottom half of a kid, and then the cop shows up. But they, like, that whole "we had a doozy of a day" conversation is one of the funniest things I've ever seen in a movie before. And then I didn't realize that was Alan Tudyk until like recently, and then it just became even more hilarious thinking of him and all the other things he's been, like Firefly and any animal in a freaking animated movie ever. And then the ending is also quite hilarious. I won't spoil it, but it's it just goes all over the place. And it is so funny. Number 8 is We Are Still Here, which is just such a good ghost movie that doesn't really follow the typical rules that a ghost movie has, because there's no cold spots. The ghosts are based on heat. The ghosts are legit ripping people apart. You can tell it's inspired by Lucio Fulci movies. And I really like the backstory they give the Dunbars, which is the family that lived in the house beforehand. I like that the family that moves in with the mother played by Barbara Crampton is like they are experiencing grief beforehand, like they're moving there because their son recently died. Barbara Crampton's character starts feeling like there's something in the house, so they invite her friends over. It's not their son. It's something completely different, and they don't really want them there. But then there's this, the town has a whole backstory about it as well. And then the whole, I want to say, last 30 minutes are just an absolute bloodbath. And you don't usually see that with haunted house movies. Like, I can't really think of any other haunted house movie where you see a hand go through someone, or like stairs melt a human being. Like, it was just so creative, so well done. Everyone did a great job. Larry Fessenden does an excellent job at being possessed. Like, I was highly impressed by that scene. And then also just the special effects are just so good looking. You can tell it's a Fulci homage just because of the amount of it, how it looks. It's so freaking gnarly. Number 7 is the Maniac remake, and I remember when I first heard that Elijah Wood was going to be in a horror movie as the antagonist, I was kind of surprised. I didn't think he was going to do a good job at it. And then I heard that it was a remake of Maniac, and then I just thought it was going to be just absolute shit. It's like, Frodo can't be a serial killer. What are you trying to tell me? And then I watched it. I rented it from my local video store. I watched it 5 times in a weekend. Made everyone I knew watch it. Made my roommate watch it, who can't really stand horror movies. And he also loved it. We invited more people over to watch it. It's shot so well. I really like the POV cam. Elijah Wood does a phenomenal job at being just this crazy man who doesn't necessarily want to do what he's doing, but he can't control himself. And then the way that they tell you his backstory about how his mother was to him was also really good through the point of view hallucination shots. All the kills are really cool. I really like how they made it so he lives in the old mannequin factory restoring old mannequins, and that's how he meets other people. Also, one of my other problems of the original one is the man who plays Frank Zito in the original. I don't necessarily see him being able to just walk up to a woman and being able to get a date out of her that easily. I mean, also, it was the 80s. That mustache was fucking hot as shit. But, like, Elijah Wood just seems way more approachable. That's just me. I'd be more likely to have a conversation with Elijah Wood than the man who played Frank Zito in the original. And then also the amount of gore in the movie, I never really warned anyone. I just told them, hey, you want to watch a movie with Elijah Wood in it? It's a horror movie. He plays a serial killer, and everyone would just go like, what? Hell yeah, I want to see that. And then once they realized what kind of movie it was, they were a little like worried about finishing it. But then I was like, no, sit down. You're gonna want to watch this. This movie is amazing. You're gonna love it. And 9 times out of 10, they loved it. I mean, Sean even brought a date over. My roommate even brought a date over to have a movie night, and that was the idea we had. Was like, let's just watch Maniac. Like, that movie's dope, man. Needless to say, that didn't really work out that well. I would say she was the 1 out of the 10 that wasn't necessarily cool with it, but hey, I never really see eye to eye with non-horror fans, but when I find a movie that I feel like more people would like, it takes a minute for them to listen to me, but then when they do listen to me, they learn that I'm typically right about these kind of things. Number 6 is Summer of '84, and around the time this movie came out, a lot of people were trying to make like coming of age films of like groups of kids that get into shenanigans because of these Stranger Things hype that everyone was having. So this movie is one of those. I believe it's the best one in my opinion. It's a kid thinks his next door neighbor is a serial killer because there's a killer loose in the town, and he sees what he believes is one of the kids that has come up dead in his neighbor's house. Now the kicker is that his neighbor is a police officer, and the whole movie does a very good job of not telling you who the real killer is. I'm not going to tell you who it is. It could be, there are a lot of parts in it where I'm like, oh, it could be them, it could be them. Like, what if it was them? And then the end comes and it's just like, fuck you, like, it wasn't any of them. Like, why do you think any of them would have done it? I'm trying my hardest not to say who it is. It's very difficult. But, like, just the relationship between him and his friends and how they believe him at first, they get caught snooping, they start to not believe him when certain things come together, and then the climax is just an absolute madness. Like, it is so good. I've shown it to a few people. I immediately picked up the Blu-ray when I heard about it. Like, that was one I didn't even watch beforehand. I just wanted the Blu-ray. I was like, I'm going to watch this movie. It's going to be amazing. And it was. But I feel like a lot of people didn't watch it because there have been a lot of movies like that in the past few years where it's like kids in the 80s coming of age film. Like, there's just so many. Like, you've got Stranger Things, Clove Hitch Killer, Super Dark Times. Not necessarily kids in the 80s, but just like a coming of age film with kids getting into shenanigans that aren't necessarily fun. But I believe Summer of '84 is the best of them. Number 5 is the Evil Dead remake. I promise this is the last remake, at least on this list. But again, just like with Maniac, when I heard Evil Dead was going to get remade, I wasn't very excited about it. I didn't think it was going to be nearly as good as it ended up being. But again, my roommate Sean, he had seen it beforehand. He was like, "No, Dalton, you need to watch this. Like, you're gonna love it. It's exactly what you want in a movie." And I was like, "Okay." So I waited for it to come to DVD. Went to the video store, picked it up. Me and a few friends watched it. So my first watching experience may have made it even better to me because I watched it with one of my friends who is a nurse, and every time someone would get attacked by a deadite, blood would get everywhere into their mouths, and then he would straight up say, "They're next. That's cross-contamination. These people are stupid and they don't understand how to deal with blood. Close your mouth. That's cross-contamination. Come on, you're going to get infected." And then every single time that was the next person. So, like, every time someone would die, we would just look over at him and be like, "So, how you feeling about this?" And then he would just go off about how no one is taking precautions. But speaking of the gore, they did a very good job of that too. Like, and then all the homages to the originals, like the car, the hand getting cut off, the tree scene, which is what I was really like, are they actually going to do that again? And then when they kind of did it, I was like, okay, that's close enough, and I was very surprised that they actually did it. And then the out of all the gore scenes in the whole movie, the only one that got me was when one of them gets attacked with a needle to the face. Because typically for me, it's just needle scenes or eye scenes will give me the willies every time. But other than that, I do think they without having an Ashley Williams in this movie, they did nail it. They nailed the feel of it, at least for me. I really liked it. Number 4 is the Babadook. Again, like Hereditary, I think this is an excellent portrait of grief and how some people handle it. Like, I just really like how the Babadook was done, like the creature itself, her finding the book. Again, I can't say too much, and it really is difficult for me to not say too much about this movie. The first time I watched it, I was living in a different house, and with a bunch of people who were like, "We like horror movies, we like horror movies." And I was like, "Okay, like the Babadook just came out, let's watch it." And I watched it with them, and they all hated it. And I was like, "What is wrong with you?" Like, seriously, they called it stupid, and I got so angry about it. I don't typically get angry about those kind of things, but like everything about it, it's not stupid. You guys just don't get it. And then so I blew up at a group of like 5 people looking at me dumbfounded. It's like, "Don't you understand? It represents her grief. Like, that's why uh I can't get into spoilers still." But like, I just, the fact that the person who plays the mother, that was her first time acting, that's amazing to me. The kid who played the son was really good too, and I like how they kind of juggle the one you hate the most throughout the movie. But without giving any spoilers away, if you haven't seen it yet, watch it. If you have seen it, good. Then you probably like it as much as I do, because there aren't a lot of people that I've talked to about it that have seen it that don't like it. Like, most people at least know it's a good movie, other than the original group I watched it with. Number 3 is Midsommar, which is probably a spoiler for the decade list as well, now that I think about it. Or not decade list, the 2019 list. So, I love this movie. I have already said I'm a fan of Ari Aster's work. Again, it's a portrait of grief in a different kind of grief. Her whole family's dead, and now she's trying to like get over it, essentially. Like, and it's such a hard scene to watch when her realizing her family's dead and then they just show the scene of it because it's heartbreaking. Like the way it happens, it was just like not a freak accident. Her sister committed suicide and took everyone else out with her. Like it's just so hard to watch at that point. And then it becomes just a very good cult movie again, just like Hereditary. Again, I would like to see what he can do other than cult movies for his next one, but Midsommar is amazing. It's shot wonderfully. I like that it's possibly the best representation of what hallucinogens do with the filming techniques they use. Like the scene where the man claps at the boyfriend and the whole frame behind him just morphs into madness. And like how the cultists act to each other. The I believe it's Rumspringa scene, everyone screaming in pain where when others feel pain as well is very frightening to me. The first time I watched it with another person, which may have been a mistake, just because it does get kind of awkward at points watching it with other people. There are a few scenes which are kind of weird, but thankfully the person I watched it with, we had already watched Hereditary together, so we were okay with naked old people beforehand. So the scene in this one wasn't. It's probably worse than Hereditary actually, but again I can't say what the scene is because that's a spoiler. But let's just say lots of naked people just standing around being weird. And then I do like how they the foreshadowing for the ending with the bear. Thankfully for some people, you don't see anything happen to the bear. It's just implied that something, not even implied, you know something happened to the fucking bear. But at least they don't show it, so I'm able to recommend it to a few other people where it's like, I don't want to watch a movie where an animal's in danger. It's like, well, you don't see it, so you're okay. Again, if you haven't seen it yet, watch it. If you have, good. I have talked to a lot of people that aren't necessarily fans of it. They've given good reason for it. I am fine with that. Like, that's your opinion, whatever. But I think it's another masterpiece from Ari Aster. And then number 2 is probably one of the movies I have the hardest time recommending to people because it's for a certain audience, a very certain audience. Mother. Darren Aronofsky is also one of my favorite directors of all time. It hurt me not putting Black Swan on this list, but I only wanted to keep it to one for him because Mother is significantly better in my opinion. Black Swan is amazing. I love Black Swan. I watched that movie 3 times in one day because I had went to my father's house. I was like, hey, I brought this new movie, you want to watch it? He's like, nah, I got other things to do. And I sat down to watch Black Swan. And then the lesbian scene started, and then he sat down and finished the rest of the movie because thankfully that caught his fucking attention. And then he said, start it over again, I want to see what caused that to happen. I'm like, okay, like I'm fine with it, I like this movie, I'll watch it again. And then we finished the movie. And then his girlfriend comes over and he says, yo, you need to see this movie. So I sat down to watch Black Swan 3 times. But with Mother, I would not even remotely think of showing it to him because Mother is a retelling of the Bible through Mother Earth's eyes. It's very screwed up. It's quite graphic. It's hard for me to find people that have even thought of seeing it. Like, I absolutely love it though, obviously because it's number 2, but like I just have such a hard time recommending it to people just because like it's like, are they going to be okay with a retelling of the Bible through Mother Earth's eyes? Are they going to be okay with violence against infants? Are they going to be okay with artsy fartsy art movies? There's just so many things that you have to know beforehand before you go into it, I was not told any of them, and I sat down and watched it with one of my friends, and he left halfway through. He was not a fan, but again, I absolutely adore this movie, and I'm looking forward to anything else Darren Aronofsky makes, because he, in my opinion, he hasn't released a bad movie yet. I even liked Noah. That one wasn't horrible, it was good. And then you also have his other movies that are hailed as classics, like Requiem for a Dream. Like, everybody loves that movie. But I'm interested to see what he does next. And then before my number one, I have a few honorable mentions. American Mary, which I also mentioned in last episode. I didn't really go into it. But American Mary is so good, and in my top 10 of all time, it missed by just a little much, and same with this one. But I just wanted to give it a little time anyway, just because I keep mentioning it. It's a revenge film about a woman who's going to med school, but then she discovers the underground body modification community and how she can make money doing that. So she leaves med school, and then a bunch of other stuff happens to make it into a revenge movie. But it's just so good. Like, the way I describe it to people typically is imagine Scarface with a woman doctor. And then my other honorable mention for this decade is Excision, which is a very hard movie to recommend to people as well, just because it's very awkward. I've described it as female Napoleon Dynamite as a horror movie, just because it is the same kind of like awkward protagonist being weird around other people and not being able to fit into society. But then you have the last 15 minutes of the movie where it becomes something completely different and also kind of heartbreaking. But without further ado, the obvious number one of the decade. I've already talked about it in the last episode, so if you want to hear me talk about it, watch the last episode. It's Hereditary, because duh, it's Hereditary. I freaking love that movie. I watched it again last week. It's still perfect. It's one of the few times I've given a 10 out of 10 to a movie. I'll typically do that like once a year for one movie. It is absolutely phenomenal. And then that means it's time to go into the year of 2019. My top 10 for the year of 2019 starts with at number 10, the Banana Splits movie, which isn't on most other people's lists I've seen so far. I don't know if a lot of people watched it due to the fact that it's a fucking Banana Splits movie, but it is so fucking funny. Like, I have a feeling that the studio that made it, I believe it was Warner Brothers, I don't remember, but I feel like they were trying to get the rights to Five Nights at Freddy's, and then they realized that, hey, like, we don't have the rights to that, but we do have the rights to the Banana Splits, so let's just make an animatronic slasher movie with those instead, and it just ends up being so funny. The gore is really good. Just the idea of saying I liked a horror movie about the Banana Splits is hilarious to me. Like, I never thought I would ever say that, but it is so good, and if you are having second thoughts about watching it just because of what it's about, what the villains are in it, like, just watch it. It's so good. It's so funny. Number 9 is I Am Mother, which I feel like a lot of people will give me shit and say that's not a horror movie. It's totally a horror movie. The concept of an apocalypse by robots is kind of horrifying, to me at least. I really like the set design of it. I like how the bunker looks. I like the robot itself, Mother, and I also like where it goes from there. Like, she's obviously hiding something from the child. Like, something obviously has happened outside that she is not aware of, and I like where it goes from there. There's not much I can really say about this movie without giving anything away, but watch it. Like, it's really good. Number 8 of this year is Three from Hell. I know a lot of people didn't like it, that I've talked to at least, but just that the Sid Haig monologue for Captain Spaulding that he does is fucking phenomenal. I was just really happy to see those characters come back, even if Captain Spaulding was replaced with Foxy. I think he did a very good job at filling his shoes. Maybe not completely, but I still really liked it. Um, and then again, it's just fun. Like, it was just really fun. I had a really fun time watching it. I watched it with a group of people, so I feel like that's the kind of movie you should just watch with a group of people, not by yourself. House of a Thousand Corpses and Devil's Rejects I watched by myself. I didn't have nearly as much fun with Devil's Rejects as I did with House of a Thousand Corpses. Like, my favorite is still House of a Thousand Corpses, followed by Devil's Rejects, followed by Three from Hell. Um, I know a lot of people like Devil's Rejects most. The first half of Devil's Rejects is amazing to me. I feel like the first half of Devil's Rejects is essentially just more House of a Thousand Corpses, and then it goes off into its own thing, more of a road movie kind of. And then that's what Three from Hell is. It's the second half of Devil's Rejects, to me at least. That's how I see it. Number 7 is a weird one. I was a member of Horror Pack for a few months, and this was an exclusive that they sent out that was a collection of short films called Hilarious. Um, I had a really fun time watching it. Like, all the short films, well, not all of them, but most of them are really good. Like, you've got Killer Cart, which is just about a killer shopping cart. That's it. Lunch Ladies, which is just lunch ladies that are in love with Johnny Depp and they want to go meet him and have like this contest, but they accidentally kill a kid, so they think, what would Johnny Depp do? And then they make meat pies out of the kid because Sweeney Todd, and I was just on the fucking ground. Like, it was so funny. But then you've got like the weird one, which is Bitten, which is about a dog that becomes a reverse werewolf for a night, turns into a human, goes out, comes back home. His owner comes back home from a failed date, has sex with the dog while he's a human. Uh, the human dog werewolf thing bites her, and then the next month on the full moon, he's a human, she's a dog. Like, it's fucking weird. And then my favorite of the collection, there's a few other ones that are good. Like, mostly the reason it's on this list is for fuck, what was it called? It's the final one in the collection. It is phenomenal. Like, it is so funny. It's about these Satanists that are not good at their job of being Satanists. They are just bumbling, shitty cultists that are trying to bring the birth of the Antichrist to life. And one of them comes late from his job at Best Buy. He's got the wrong mask. Everyone's got these satanic looking masks, and he's just wearing a panda mask. And then they finally read from the book. They get everything's summoned, everything's doing great, the pregnant lady's about to give birth, and then a hand comes out of her. They realize the book that had an upside down cross the whole time was actually upside down. They've been reading from the Bible. They didn't give birth to the Antichrist, they gave birth to the second coming of Jesus accidentally. And again, I was on the fucking ground. I found that film alone on YouTube and I just sent it to everyone. Like, because I don't think it's going to be easy to find Hilarious outside of the way that I was able to get it. I can't find it anywhere on the internet. I can find the separate shorts, but the movie itself is just, I can't find it anywhere. 6 is another one that I've heard a lot of people say bad things about. Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile is my number 6 for the year. I really like it. I didn't think Zac Efron was going to do a good job at being Ted Bundy. I think he did a great job. The movie is a little different from what I thought it was going to be, but I like what they did with it. It kind of reminded me of how My Friend Dahmer was. And from what I heard, a lot of people weren't cool with that either. They didn't want to see Jeffrey Dahmer as a relatable character. They really just wanted to see him kill people, apparently, is the consensus I saw. Same with this film. It's Ted Bundy in a different light. It's how he was actually acting at the time of the trial. So I feel like it's more accurate to how he was, because he didn't say that he did it. He was yelling about how he was innocent the whole time and fighting the whole way. Like, we all know he fucking did it, duh. But, like, it took him a while to even admit to it. Like, I feel like that was more of a right before he was about to get executed thing. But, like, all I have to say is, if you are going to watch this movie, watch it with an open mind. I feel like that's the only way you can fully enjoy it. If you go in expecting, oh, Ted Bundy's going to murder a bunch of people, you're not going to have a good time. Like, it's not about that. Number 5 is another one I can't really say much about. It is Eli. Now, I heard nothing about this movie. It just came up on Netflix one day and I decided to watch it. Holy shit. It is so good. I didn't expect the ending to come. It's just, all I can tell you is a child is put into a hospital for a condition he has, and he's told nothing about his condition. He's just told that he has some kind of sickness and that the hospital is going to help him, and then shit just gets weird from there. Like, if you haven't seen it yet, watch it. Do not look up anything about it. Just watch it. Trust me. My number 4 for the year of 2019 is Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Now, I'm going to sound like everyone else when I talk about this, because I feel like it would have been better as a horror anthology, just like everyone else did. Because I grew up with the books. I actually got in trouble for getting them from the library at the school, because my mom found them and she was like, these are fucked up, why are you reading these? And I loved them. Like, the artwork in it was so good, and the movie did a great job of bringing that artwork to life. The only thing is, like, I didn't think I was going to like the non-anthology story structure of it. I ended up really liking it, and the way it ends, like, I feel like they could make a second one, or even with how they mention a bunch of the other stories in it, like a prequel of sorts, because I would love to see the Wendigo in a movie. Like, they hint at it have happened before with the Wendigo, but they never show it. I do think I would definitely watch more of it if they made more of it, just because everything about this movie is, at least the effects of it, they're great. I love it. I only had one small problem with it, and it's the Mitai Doti Walker section of it. I thought he was, it wasn't anything about him. It wasn't anything about the effects. It was, once you start hearing Mitai Doti Walker, I kept saying, like, that dog needs to start singing or else I'm going to be pissed. And then we realized, because I was watching it with my girlfriend and she doesn't like watching animals in danger, and then I realized, holy shit, the dog dies in that story. And then we were both happy when the dog ran away, and I was like, yeah, but I still want that fucking dog to start singing soon. And then it didn't. So that was my only problem with the movie, is that Mitai Doti Walker was not met with a Litchi Kitchi Molly Wally Dingo Dingo Dingo. I feel like that was a very missed opportunity. My number 3 of the year is Velvet Buzzsaw. So I feel like this is another one that is hard to recommend to some people, just because I saw a lot of reviews that people didn't like it, and I thought it was absolutely amazing. Jake Gyllenhaal does a great job in this movie. I love the concept of the modern art world is shitty, let's talk about it. And also, it just feels like a Tales from the Crypt episode, like from the 90s, where it's shitty people doing shitty things and then getting their comeuppance. Like, I love that concept. I just love it, and it's so funny at points. Like, just all the ideas that people had to do for the fake art exhibit, where it's like the orb that you put your hand into, which ends up being a dope death, or just the Robo Hobo, or whatever his name is, where it's just a homeless man that's a robot. Like, when I think about the modern art world, those are the kind of things I think that people think are art. Sorry for saying think like 5 times in one sentence, but like, I just, I really don't understand art shows like that where people just stand in front of it and go, this means this means that, and it's just like an orb that you put your hand into and feel something. And that's the character that Jake Gyllenhaal plays. I probably do the same thing about movies now that I think about it, so I'm also an idiot, but whatever. But he does such a good job at being an art critic that is just full of himself and hilarious. Like Jake Gyllenhaal, I learned this year is actually a very good actor. Like he did good in Donnie Darko. Before this year, that was the only film I had seen that he was in that I remember. This year I watched Nightcrawler, Velvet Buzzsaw, and Enemy, and all three of those movies were amazing. And Jake Gyllenhaal does a fucking phenomenal job in all three of them. So, Velvet Buzzsaw, number three. Watch it if you haven't yet. Apparently, I'm the only one who loves it, seemingly, so don't expect too much because it might just be me just having Tales from the Crypt uh, nostalgia, but I thought it was phenomenal. My number two film for the year is another movie that I can't say much about other than just watch it, which is The Perfection. It was another one that came on the Netflix. I hadn't really seen anything about it yet, and I watched it, and holy shit, it is not what you think it's going to be. About halfway through, not even halfway through. So like 30 minutes into the movie, it changes. Another 30 minutes in, it's like, holy shit! Like everything you know was a freaking lie about it, and then it just keeps doing that. Like the best thing I can say for people that don't know anything about it, which one, good, you're not supposed to know anything about it going into it, is if you've seen Old Boy, it's those kind of twists. It's that amount of twistiness. Like Asian revenge films, essentially. It's like you think you know what's going on, they twist it, and then, oh, so this is what's actually happening now. Nope, they twist it again. So this is what's happening? No. Like, you're wrong. You're constantly wrong, and it's going to keep twisting until it gets to the end of it. And I absolutely love it. The Perfection is it's easily one of the best movies, in my opinion, of this year. It's number two. But it's just such a good movie, and I really like where it went, and that's what I have to leave it at. And then my number one of the year 2019 has already been mentioned, and I did kind of spoil it for myself in my decade list, but my favorite film of last year is Midsommar. I've already talked about it to this point. I've already said everything that I can think to say about it. So we're going to have an anticlimactic top 10 list number one. Next week is going to be the last top 10 list for a while for that episode, in that I'm doing the top 10 horror video games again, in my opinion. And then after that, I'll try to come up with other ideas for episodes. I'm sure I'll come up with something. I can probably get other people on here. We can watch movies, talk about them. It's a hell of a lot easier to do this with more than one person, but I'll catch you next time.